We're live. You can start talking. Okay, Assalamu alaikum Yasin. We're live. So let's get this show started. Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everybody to the first sort of live chit chat sort of session, isn't it, Mona?
Yeah, that's right.
Um,
Yeah.
we're just planning on having this like as an informal area, um, doing a tester for today. Let's see how it goes for today,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe we can look into doing this as a regular thing where essentially we just sit down for half an hour on a weekend evening, most likely. Sorry, a weekday evening.
Yeah.
Um,
It's not a weekend yet, Yasin. I know
yeah.
you're looking forward to the weekend, but it's not a weekend yet. We still got 2 more days to go.
I think the thing is because of Bank Holiday Monday, isn't it? It's just thrown
Ah,
everything off. I don't know
okay.
about you, but I needed
Mm-hmm.
that Monday.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, just like as an informal discussion, if anybody has some like questions that they want to throw at Morna, if you've got any questions for me, I'm sorry, I'm not able to provide any sort of answers. Um, or if just you just want to talk about anything random, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
may be. Um, I think what I was thinking and the way that I see this is get a cup of tea, get a cup of coffee, get some hot chocolate, whatever your favorite hot drink is, because winter's here now as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Winter
just sit down.
already,
I
Yasin?
think so. I think well, it's on its
Oh,
way.
you're
It's
quite
about to
you're
set
quite
in.
gloomy, aren't you? Pessimistic.
Mm.
Come on.
No, no, I wouldn't say it's pessimistic. I just enjoy like a hot drink and a cold winter's evening, and just sat like by the metaphorical fireplace, so to speak.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I don't know about
Well,
you. Have you got any drinks, Mona?
have I got any drinks? No, I've only just got a bit of water. That's it, really.
A bit of water.
Which I managed to grab last minute because I completely forgot that I should keep myself hydrated.
I think this is the major advantage of having somebody alongside you, Mona,
Mm.
doing
Okay.
something.
All right.
Because if you have somebody that's speaking alongside you, in the time when you're not speaking, you get to have whatever you're drinking.
Yeah.
I've got
So
some
what are
mint.
you having right now? What's that?
I've got some mint tea.
Mint teas. Oh,
Mm.
interesting. No, I've just got a boring bottle of water. Um, to be honest, it's quite late to have coffee or tea. I'm trying to get into a habit now, unsuccessfully at the moment. So in when once autumn begins, and the leaves begin to fall, um, my routine changes. So I try to go sleep early and wake up early. So before in summer, I'd work till like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm,
But now what I do is I go sleep early and try and wake up early and work early in the morning. So get a few hours in before my daughters wake up.
mhm.
But it's difficult making that switch because your body is used to a different routine.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so I resist the coffee and tea in the evening um, as much as I can.
I think I don't know about this. You might know more, but things like mint tea, green tea, berry tea, I always assume that they either have a very low amount of caffeine or no caffeine at all.
Hmm.
Which is why like I feel comfortable drinking them at night. But I would never have a cup of coffee at this time.
Hmm.
Neither would I have like a cup of tea, like a proper cup of tea, at this time.
Hmm. Blogging theology says salam. We're not going to be doing any theology, I hope, tonight. It's a bit late.
Alaikum salam.
But theology is a topic that I have a strong interest in. Um, Sorry, we're moving from coffee into theology, so that's quite heavy.
You need the
um,
caffeine for the theology.
yeah, you need some caffeine before the theology, actually. Yeah, but yeah, uh, staying awake late at night. It's never good, burning a midnight oil, but sometimes, with family and kids.
Mhm,
I mean, literally, my girls went to sleep 15 minutes ago. So I was like rushing them into bed. I'm like, you have to go sleep because I've got this session at 8:30, and I don't want to miss it. It's our first one, and I don't want to be late. But fortunately, we managed to get it going on time, so that was good. Yasin, you've got one only at the moment, haven't you? One son. Um,
He's still awake. Now's not
is
his
still
time to
awake.
sleep.
Yeah, yeah. When they're really young, there's just that unpredictability with children. Anything can happen. Anything can happen. Yes, so you might need to run away in the next like minute or so, or 2 minutes or so. But once they get a little bit older, I promise you, it gets easier.
Yeah, if I need to go, I'll just be hitting the mute button, hitting the closing the camera, and
Yeah,
you'll see me just like run away.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but
yeah.
he's okay for now. Maybe if we did this one day later, it might have been problematic because he's got to visit the doctor tomorrow,
Okay.
which I don't think for him is going to be a pleasant trip.
Yeah, yeah. Well, welcome everyone. So if you want to ask questions, or I mean, nothing controversial, but you can ask questions. If you want to just make comments, you can do that as well. We'll try and make this. Me and Yasin will try and make this a regular weekly thing. Maybe get different people on as well. But this is just our first real exploration in just having a weekly chat during the week as well. So, I mean, I'm really tired. I'm exhausted already. But it's a nice way to just relax with people. People can ask questions. People can interact. Um, I love interacting with people, by the way, especially at the mosque. I mean, obviously, we go to the mosque to pray, but it's also a very social place in the sense that you meet people. And I think the COVID pandemic has really shown that to be true in terms of, a lot of people struggle just not meeting friends and colleagues at the mosque just after the prayers, just having a bit of a conversation, seeing how people are doing. And it's nice when you go to the mosque now and you meet people and you can talk to them. And I think we are social animals, so that's an important part of our life.
I
Yeah,
love how you use that term, social animals.
yeah, we are. We I mean, there's obviously in our tradition, within Islamic tradition, there is an aspect of khalwa, and you find this obviously in the entire life of the Prophet. In fact, all the prophets, where they sort of secluded themselves, but it was never permanent, right? There were times when during the day you would be with the people, but Allah mentions in the Quran there were times when the Prophet himself is reminded to spend time with his Creator. So he would spend time with his family, with people, and with God. So you can see that sort of tripartite division of his time, if you like, when you read his seerah. And I always encourage people to read his seerah just to get a sense. And there's books written on, you can get books. I think there's a book in Arabic which talks about, just a daily routine of the Prophet, peace be upon him, in terms of what he would do. I mean, you don't have that for any human being, right? In such a granular detail.
Mm.
So you have that worth reading. I mean, you don't have to mimic him, but you get the idea of how he was a prophet, right? So he had a lot of responsibilities, but yet we find that he spent time with people, um, with his wives, his children, but he was also with the people. He was with the companions. So when you read the seerah or when you read the hadith, he's talking to the companions. The companions are mentioning him, so you get a sense that he was very sociable. He was very much interwoven to society that he lived in, but at the same time, the Prophet was also a very private person as well. And there's a book where they talk about his moments of grief and his moments of sadness as well in his own private life as well. So there's much to be learned from the life of the Prophet. And we don't have, there's no human being, to my knowledge, of whom we know so much, right? So much is archived through our tradition about his life, and it's given birth to a whole civilization, just his life, because he was the primary recipient of the Quran, to whom revelation came from the angel Gabriel, and he modeled for us, if you like, if I can use that word, how to live the Quran. Because of course one cannot just purely rely on the Quran, right? One has to understand the Quran with the prophetic implementation of that divine guidance. So that's
So,
important.
I mean, we've talked about Sira at this part, right? So obviously, a resource to flag here would be your Sira CDs that you've already got,
Mhm.
which is available on YouTube. So if anybody is after like a more detailed breakdown of the Sira, then they can just look at on your channel. They can find a playlist to do with Sira, which I know that is quite extensive.
Yeah,
Um, but alongside that, if anybody wanted any particular reading material,
yeah.
now I'm going to ask you for two suggestions here. One suggestion, a shorter version. Let's say, for example, a one volume work or just a booklet um, on the Sira, and then maybe like a longer work as well. What would your recommendations be?
So my first recommendation, one of the first books that I was really inspired by, is the book by Martin Links. Now, It's a really short book. I read that book actually. I'll tell you before I tell you more about answering your question, I guess. I read that book in Mecca many years ago, and I was actually reading a book. I read it in one sitting, and I read it while facing the Kaaba. And I know there are historical question marks over the accuracy of certain things over that book, but remember, it's not an academic book, right? It's a book that gives you a glimpse into the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And Martin Lings is an excellent writer, by the way. Um, so I would recommend his book, Martin Ling's book. Um, I think it's Muhammad based on earlier sources or something. You can Google it. If you can't find it, get in touch. What was the question you're asking again? Sorry.
But that would, so you're given one answer of like a shorter treatise
Mhm.
on the Sirah, but what about a longer, um, something obviously with better accuracy as well as more detail? What would you recommend in that
Yeah, you mean
instance?
in English language, right?
Um,
Yeah, in
I mean,
English language, I mean, in the Arabic language, there's many. In Urdu language, you'll find many, right? But in English language, there are a few. There's one which is a translation from by Turaf Publishing, which is on the seer of the Prophet. I will try and find that for you literally right now. So there's a book by Turaf Publishing, which I'm gonna find. Yeah, the Prophet of Mercy, the book's called, and I'm gonna share the link directly to that book. It's a very academic book, but it's very useful. I'm gonna share the link here in the comment section,
who's the
right? So
author
you can.
of that book, Mona?
So that was translated, but that was translated by a famous scholar of the Indian subcontinent, Abul Hassan Ali Nadwi, who's also called Maulana Ali Mia,
Mm.
an exemplary scholar, very well researched, very rich, a lot of detail in there. I would recommend that book if people want to get a book in English besides the one I've mentioned. There are a few more actually, um, but I think that's quite a good book. I've shared the link in the chat there, so people can, you know, access it or buy it from there directly from there. I definitely recommend that book. So those are two that I would recommend among many others. Um, in Arabic, there's many that you can read about the Sirah. Sirah is basic life of the Prophet. For those of you who don't know, it takes you through. It's very important because you get an insight to the community and the people upon whom revelation descended upon, right? The early community, the first recipients of divine revelation in our history, Islamic history at least. So it's a very useful book, or very useful genre to read. Now, obviously, people might say, "Oh, I want an authentic source." Well, remember that you're dealing with the life of the Prophet. You're not dealing with an academic life of the Prophet here. So scholars in the genre in the field of hadith studies would say that we're not going to be as strict in terms of the narrating that goes on there, right? It's just a basic narratives of the Prophet's life, and a broad arc of the narrative would be correct, right? And of course, if people want to check in more detail, they can always research certain aspects. But what the Sira basically does, it gets all the huge corpus in many ways of the life of the Prophet or about the Prophet, which is the Hadith tradition, the Hadith canon, and they basically try and bring together a narrative of his life. What was he like before he came? What was his history? What was his history of the people that lived there? And then what was it like before he was born? What was life like when he was a child? And it helps you to understand even controversial topics nowadays that people like to bring up, like jihad or these sort of things. Like people, I argue in my paper that's going to be published, God willing, very soon, that you can't understand jihad unless you understand the Sira. Unless you don't understand, you don't take time out to read pre-Arabian society, pre-Islamic society, how it was constituted and how these communities work and what the Prophet was dealing with, you won't be able to understand jihad. Otherwise, you'll make anachronistic claims. You basically say, well, why did the Prophet do this? Why did Muslims do this? You have to understand the society within which the early Muslim communities found themselves in.
Essentially, contextualize
Yeah.
whatever you're hearing about.
Yeah, because remember, Yasin, the hadith. So when people go on these websites, sunnah.com, and they throw hadith out and they say the Prophet said this, or, you know, this is in this book or that book, what they're basically doing in modern jargon is they're getting one of these, and they're getting one of these, a mobile phone, and they're taking this, they're sharing a screenshot shot of the life of the Prophet. Because what a hadith does is it basically gives you a screenshot of the life of the Prophet or certain aspect of his life, right? Now we know from a screenshot, a picture tells 1,000 stories. So what we really need is we need to get all the screenshots, all the hadiths that are pertaining to that topic, that whatever it may be, purification, jihad, to do with salah, to do with prayer, whatever it may be, and we need to bring them all together and then make sense of it. So one should never take a singular tradition, just like one should never take a single verse and then extrapolate from that um, a theological or a legal claim. That's why the field of the fuqaha, of the jurists, is very, very important, because that's what they do. They filter that for you. They do the hard work for you. They say, look, we've looked at thousands, maybe millions of traditions, the language we've looked at, the rhetoric we've looked at, the authenticity we've looked at, who said what we've looked at. We've looked at all of this, and we've developed a theory to understand this, and this is what we understand from this whole from all of these images that come together. That's very, very important to bear in mind.
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, it's about knowing. So, for example, when you're talking about the particular hadith and it's a snapshot, but the problem is, even that snapshot that a person is seeing by looking at a hadith, they still don't understand that hadith in its entire context as well. Like, for
Yeah.
example, the Prophet ﷺ may have mentioned something to a particular person or to a particular group at a particular instance. But if them
Mm,
details aren't there within that hadith and you extrapolate, then that's definitely going to cause issues. And I think the other thing to probably mention here is about language as well. The Arabic language is a very delicate and a very precise language,
mhm,
um, in which sometimes translations can't do justice to each of the words,
mm.
and one mistranslation of a word can be detrimental.
Yeah. I mean, you've watched some of my videos, you've watched some of my lessons. I make the point time and time again, the use of words, what they mean. I mean, I did a video yesterday, which people can find on YouTube, just on the word hamd, which is the first word in the Quran when you open it, right? One of the first words, alhamdu, praise. We translate as praise, but I spent maybe 45 minutes just trying to understand what that word means and what it's not. Because one of the ways you can define something is by saying, well, it is this or it's not this, right? Or
Mm.
synonyms. So, well, there are words that are similar to it, but they don't mean the same thing. And literally, we only did like 5% of the lesson, right? So you need, I mean, this is a broader problem in society, that we don't define our words properly, what they mean. So this morning, for example, yesterday my daughter was listening to a nasheed or something, and the word infinity was um, was said. So she asked me, "What does infinity mean?" So I said to her, "Okay, tomorrow we're going to get a dictionary, and you're going to find what the word means." So she looked in the dictionary, and I said, "Okay, what does the word infinity mean in dictionary?" We wrote out a sentence. We literally wrote out a sentence. It was a long sentence, and I said to her, "Right, let's break down this sentence, because let's see what information is telling us." So the first thing we found out was infinity was a noun. What does a noun mean? Because a noun means something as well, right? It's a naming of something. So what does noun mean as opposed to a verb? All right. And why do we have nouns and verbs? Right. So we had a conversation on that. Then we said, what does infinity mean? And infinity is a number. It actually says in a dictionary it's a number. Right. So it's okay. So infinity is a number. So that's the second thing we're learning about definition. So we're breaking this down. We're having a conversation about just a single word. What does that word actually mean? It's a noun, it's a word, it's a number, but it's a number that's bigger than any other number. It's a number that doesn't have any limit to it. Like we don't actually know what the number is, right? So I said, why do we use infinity? So I asked the question, why do we use infinity, right? To describe something, right? Why do we? The fact that we realize as human beings, and you've done math better than me probably, the fact that we recognize that there are limitless things, there's meanings that we can give to things that are limitless, is fascinating. I mean, we've never experienced something that's limitless, right? Everything that we know comes to an end. I mean, this computer will eventually have to go in the bin. Me and you will eventually die. I'll change my glasses. You'll That drink you're holding will eventually need to go, right? That watch you're holding, you're wearing on your right wrist, right? That will go at some point. Everything we know as human beings, everything that we are habituated to comes to an end. But yet, as human beings, we can still fathom this idea of infinity. And I just think that's fascinating because we've imagined something, we've put a definition to it, we've got a word for it, yet we've never experienced it, right? And
Mm.
so I think that's where does that come from? Like, who gave us that ability to think at that level? Sorry, I'm going off on a whole philosophical rant here, but I think these things are really fascinating. Just off one word, just a conversation of one word.
Hmm. No, no, I think, and to be honest, I think that's exactly what this sort of Q&A or this chat is meant to be about. Just like going off on tangents. Sometimes we need to do that as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, in you're mentioning about like within the dictionary and infinity within the dictionary, but the thing is, a lot of these words, um, not necessarily words that we use on a day-to-day basis, but a lot of words that we see also have like technical definitions as well.
Of course.
So you've mentioned like what infinity is to the general public and what that would be described as, in in a dictionary. On
Hmm.
the other hand, you also have like technical definitions of the word infinity, where
Hmm.
in mathematics and physics, although it means a similar thing, it's not exactly the same. The definition is more precise.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, I don't want to get too technical, but essentially, from what I understand, mathematicians and physicists don't define infinity as a number,
Hmm.
um, but a limit, I think.
Okay.
Um, but I mean, this is again, this is really important because when we're talking about naming things and giving things names, these technical definitions within their field, within their science, are really important as well. I remember, like when we were in university, um, the first few lessons of any new module that we would study or any new chapter of mathematics we would study would just be spent behind definitions. That you define this, what's this, what's this, what's this, what's this, and all of these definitions you needed, because if you didn't have the definitions in place, there was no chance you were going to progress any further and do anything that was remotely complex. Um, and
Yeah.
that's the same with other fields as well. Like I'm taking a course on something else at the moment as well. Um, the first thing that the teacher did was define all the terminology. What does X mean? What does Y mean? What does Z mean? Um, I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah. So because you have to define your terms, so that you can, I'm going to say here, you can come to terms, right? It's very important that, I mean, let's even go back to, let's look at the Quran, for example, right? Um, so Allah says in the Quran, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. One of the things that God gifted us with was that we are able to give name to things. We're able to give asma, ism. We're able to name things. Like, when someone says a word, an image comes in your mind. When someone says horse, something comes in your mind straight away, right? The ability to give to we have the ability to name things. That's very powerful. To be able to, just like today, people can, people, they can name things, like, for example, extremism, terrorists, these words that are used. The fact that you can choose who's a terrorist and who's not, right? And you have the power to do that is very powerful, right? It's
Yeah,
very symbolic. But I'm using a controversial example, but or Islamist, right? People use these words to basically scare people. But as soon as someone says Islamist, like scared, oh, I better be careful because someone's labeled me Islamist or jihadi or something. But the Quran actually tells us, God tells us that we taught Adam, we taught Adam how to name things, and there's meanings behind things. Like we do believe as Muslims that things have meanings, life has a meaning, there's a purpose behind things, right? Because naming things comes with meaning, there's ma'ani with it, there's meanings with it. And that's why in the hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, we have a hadith that he says, min husn islam mar'i tarku ma la ya'ni, that the beauty of a person's Islam is to leave, look at the word he uses, la ya'nihi, ma'na, yeah, to leave that, we translate it as that which has no purpose, but it actually means that which has no meaning, right? From
okay.
a person's Islam is to leave those things which has no meaning. Now, you don't pursue things that has no meaning, that has no purpose behind it. So we as Muslims, we do believe that things have meaning for us, right? That's why we indulge in poetry and we indulge in language and all these things because they really have meaning for us. So it's important that language, being able to use words correctly, grammar correctly, is very, very important. I'm trying to do that in vain with my daughters. I don't know how successful I'm going to be, but I try and get them to spot sentences and how to break down sentences. Right? What's a verb?
Okay.
What's a noun, and so forth. Like we do in Arabic, because I know you're learning Arabic, Yasin, at the moment, which is a very noble thing to do. And I encourage everyone to really learn, or at least try and learn the Arabic language, because there are online some great people who are very accessible and will teach you Arabic in a way that suits your busy lifestyle.
I think this is the thing, isn't it? It doesn't require a genius to learn Arabic, because sometimes I think some people find that, or it's made out to them that it's really difficult to learn.
Hmm.
It's not. It's just it's an investment of time. Once you have some passion and you convert that into action, it's all it is dedication. After, if you can
Yeah,
dedicate yourself, apply yourself, inshallah, you learn.
yeah,
Um, of course, we're busy people, um, no doubt about that. But just need to take some time out of our busy schedules, inshallah. And like Moana mentioned, there's so many people who are offering like fantastic resources, um, fantastic courses, um, some of them being free as well. Um, but don't be scared to pay for something if you know that it's going to be a benefit as well. Don't be scared to pay. Um, I think for me, I can maybe say this where Mona maybe can't, that we've become accustomed to our ulama or our scholars giving things for free and doing things for free. And we've become so accustomed to it that we believe it's our right. Um, and really, the opposite is true. That where knowledge is concerned, inshallah, we should try to chip in wherever we can.
mm,
Uh, because the thing is, especially nowadays, equipment costs, resources costs, time costs.
mm,
Um, we know how much like our day-to-day expenses are nowadays. It's not cheap running a house. Um, so yeah,
yeah,
if it even if you have to pay, go for it. Bismillah.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, it's cheap. I mean, compared to, I went to madrasa education, right? It's a couple of £100, if that, right, for a year, and you get fed, you get a healthy, strong education. You go to university, which is where I went to afterwards. It's what, £9,000 a year? That's just the fees, right? £9,000 a year, just the fees, and then you're talking about other things at the end. And so the difference is phenomenal. But remember that both are important. But here you're learning knowledge that will open your mind, open your heart, and bring you closer to your creator. I mean, once you can learn Arabic, the whole tradition is yours, right? You're no longer relying on translation or someone else to translate for you, or some other paper or book that's been translated, which is never going to be really better. But you can actually access the work yourself. um, and Arabic it's very much like going to a gym. The more you stick with it, the more you practice it, the more you keep doing it, the better you will get. I mean, I wasn't perfect when I first, came out and started reading Arabic, but you just keep. It's like English as well. Reading books in English. Eventually, you get faster, you get better at it, you improve at it, and you can read sentences quicker, chapters quicker, books quicker. You can spot if a book is really something that you want to spend, a lot of your time reading, or just you just want to use as a reference book. You can sort of in your mind work out what books are useful. So, is this something I really want to read in detail, or is it something I'm just going to kind of gloss through and pick up, you know, bits that might be useful? So that's very, very important to bear in mind as well.
mm, definitely.
So, I mean, but of course, like I said, um, books aren't the only form of knowledge, right? Um, in our tradition, in Islamic tradition, we also place a great amount of emphasis on sohbah, right, which is sitting with scholars. This is why our scholars would say, "Sammu lana rijalakum." Tell me who your scholars were. Who did you study with? Especially with our culture today, with social media, where everyone claims to be an authority or a scholar or a sheikh, and people can't differentiate between a celebrity and a scholar, and they're all just one person. It's important that we know who people studied with. Which senior teacher did this person study with? Yeah, they might be able to recite Arabic by heart and really, prose and verse, but do they have the companionship of their teachers? Have they sat with their teachers? Who have they learned from? Have they had the tarbiyah, right? The molding, the spiritual molding from their teachers. That's very, very important as well. So you have to be careful and very wary in terms of who you take your knowledge from, right? It doesn't mean you have to scrutinize everybody, but you have to get to a stage in your life where you have the abilities to know that, this person isn't really someone I should be learning from, right? He or she is more of a celebrity person, but this is someone that's really, really um, insightful and that I can benefit from. And they're not always on social media. They're not always going to be on social media with a million followers. They might be your local imam. They might be your local friend in your community. So you've got to have the ability to discern the charlatans from the real scholarship as well. That's very, very important, especially nowadays and age.
Yeah, definitely.
I think we've had a really fruitful conversation today. Um, we intend to keep it brief, and hopefully we'll try and do it as a regular thing, Yasin,
Sure.
and try and get more people to come. Any final comments before I end this broadcast?
No, no. Just if anybody did enjoy or wants to join in the conversation next week or has something that they want us to talk about, then feel free to leave it in the comments or just contact us through social media.
Yeah, excellent. And I'm always there to help you guys out when I can. And it's been lovely having this. It's nice to get out of the ivory towers. I'm always stuck in my books and reading. So it's nice when people like Yasin can twist my arm and say, come on, social media a little bit, do a few videos. I don't mind doing that. I'm happy to do that. Um, I'll probably, I'm more comfortable with being alone with my books, but we are people who have to serve our community as well at the same time.
Mm.
So we'll end with that, God willing, inshallah.
Okay.
And hopefully, I'll see you all next week. Until then, take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.